Oh boy, time for a pretty big one. Today I'm taking a look at Sonic Adventure for the Sega Dreamcast. Well, I'm looking at the GameCube port specifically because it's the one I can record, and I didn't own a Dreamcast. Just like I didn't own a Saturn, I didn't keep going on with Sega consoles. Sorry. Anyway, Sonic Adventure was the big Sonic title released alongside Sega's next-gen console, the Dreamcast, in 1998. It was the most powerful console at the time and would go on to have a pretty big cult following. Sonic Adventure was Sonic's first real 3D game. Sure, Sonic the Fighters, Sonic R, and Sonic Jam were in 3D, for the most part, but this was the first time a Sonic platformer was in full 3D, and was the beginning of what will become the dominant form of Sonic games for years to come. At the time of its release, Sonic Adventure was very well received, scoring 8s or higher with the majority of game critics. It's also considered by many fans to be the last really good Sonic game. However, it hasn't exactly aged well, and people have started to take notice. The game has been ported to several consoles over the years. As I mentioned, I have the version for the GameCube, but it also was ported to the PlayStation Network, the PC, and the Xbox 360. And with every release, it seems to get lower and lower scores, and is nowadays bashed repeatedly. I personally love this game. I think it's great, but it isn't without its flaws, and trust me, they can be pretty big flaws. But anyway, let's just dive right into it. The game is broken up into 6 different stories, each with a different playable character, playstyle, and level design. However, you only start with Sonic and have to unlock the other characters as you meet them in the game's story. Sonic, of course, happens to be the most fun. He also has the most stages. You just run and jump really fast through each of the different levels and hope you don't fall off the edge. This was also the first game to utilize Sonic's homing attack, a standard in Sonic games these days. After jumping, if you tap the jump button again, you lock onto an enemy or target nearby, and you can keep doing that to attack multiple enemies and oftentimes get across gaps. This can actually cause some pretty cheap deaths as well. Oftentimes you'll lock onto something you didn't want to lock onto and plummet to your death. And sometimes you won't lock onto anything at all. Another new ability Sonic has is the Light Dash, another move he'd have in several games to come. This move allows Sonic to follow a trail of rings at Sonic speeds until the trail ends, even if it's in the air. He can also Spin Dash, which as you know is a classic Sonic move introduced in Sonic 2. However, get used to never using it ever. As Sonic games have gone more and more 3D heavy, the Spin Dash has become less and less useful, but it's still always there just on principle. The next playable character is Tails. Tails' levels are just like Sonic's. In fact, you're racing against Sonic. The objective in each of his stages is to get to the goal ring before Sonic does. Tails is slower than Sonic, but has his trademark ability to fly, and can access a number of shortcuts littered around the tracks to make it almost impossible for Sonic to win. That and the AI-controlled Sonic is a moron. However, to this day, this is the only 3D Sonic game that seemed to get playing as Tails right, so there's something to be said there. But then, on the other end of the spectrum, we have Knuckles. I hate the Knuckles story in this game. Sega decided that Knuckles needed his own gimmick because, I guess, being able to glide and climb walls wasn't good enough, so Knuckles spends his time in these relatively small, confined stages playing hide-and-seek with a bunch of Master Emerald pieces. I hate this. It's so tedious and not fun. I love Knuckles. I should love playing as Knuckles. But no. Instead, I wander around each stage for 10 minutes hoping my Emerald Radar goes off so I can find one of the pieces of the Emerald and get closer to finishing this boring story. At least the radar will go off no matter what order you approach the Emeralds in, which is more than I can say about Sonic Adventure 2, but we'll get to that when the time comes. Now, some people I know actually like Knuckles' playstyle in this game, and to them, good for you. I don't. At all. Moving on. Amy is the next playable character, in her first playable role in a game that mattered. In Amy's level, you run from the beginning of the stage to the end, though much slower than Sonic. Her stages are more about puzzle solving and platforming, which I'm all for. I actually enjoy it even. It's a nice change of pace from the run-run-run mentality of Sonic and Tails' stages. She can even use her trademark hammer to kill enemies, jump higher, and of course, solve puzzles. But as you'd expect, nothing can ever be this good in a 3D Sonic game. See, Amy's mode is plagued by one huge flaw. She's being chased by a giant robot the whole time. Yes, Amy's stages are all about outrunning a huge robot named Zero, and it gets old fast. He's always on you. No matter how far ahead you get, he'll just pop out of the wall later. Hit him with your mallet? Sure, you'll stun him for a few seconds, but he'll come back madder than ever. I like that it gives you a sense of urgency, like you absolutely have to get to the end of the stage because your life depends on it, but it's still annoying, and I would have much preferred being able to go through the levels at my own pace. It's annoying trying to solve puzzles while being shot at. Next we have E102 Gama, a new character introduced in this game. He's one of Eggman's elite E-series of robots, but something goes wrong and he decides Eggman is his enemy. Gama's stages all involve blowing things up and fighting a boss robot at the end, all within a 3-minute time limit. Gama's stages are a lot of fun, and he has the most boss battles, but they're also the shortest. The first stage you can beat in literally seconds. Gama also has the most interesting story, but I'll get to that in a second. For now, let's talk about everybody's favorite character, Big the Cat. Big is another new character created for this game, and he's one of everybody's least favorite characters. I personally love Big. I think he's awesome, and he's voiced by Duke Nukem. But I absolutely hate big stages. Hate them. See, you know how Sonic is all about going fast and platforming and stuff? Well, big stages are about fishing. Or a frog. You spend each of Big's 4 stages fishing a frog out of a body of water with some pretty lame fishing mechanics that I'm still not even entirely sure how to use. When you first get a bite, you have to jam the control stick to get the frog or fish to stay on the line. Then you have to constantly tap the button to reel it in, but letting up whenever the meter shows the line's about to break. But you also have to move the control stick back and forth depending on which direction the frog is pulling the line. It's very confusing, very tedious, very boring, and just doesn't belong in a Sonic game. Sure, it becomes much easier once you get all of his lure and rod upgrades, but it still feels more like a chore than an actual game. If I wanted a fishing game, I'd buy one of Sega's mini bass fishing titles, or I'd just play Twilight Princess. I appreciate the variety, but fishing simply doesn't belong in a game like this, especially not when it's mandatory. Each character has their own story told from their perspective, but intertwines with everybody else's story. It's a pretty interesting setup, but does have a lot of strange plot holes. The main overlaying story involves the Master Emerald being broken and releasing a mythical monster named Chaos into the world. Dr. Eggman finds Chaos and wants to use him to destroy the planet. Each time Chaos eats a Chaos Emerald, he transforms and becomes more powerful. So it's up to Sonic and friends to find the Chaos Emeralds and stop Eggman and Chaos from destroying everything. Meanwhile, an Echidna girl named Tikal also broke free from the Master Emerald and takes each of the characters back to the past to show them what really happened with Chaos and how they have to stop it from happening again. It's some heavy, if not confusing, stuff. Each story has its own separate take on it. Sonic's all about finding the emeralds and stopping Eggman, as is Tails' story since he's with Sonic for most of the game, though he does have to stop Eggman from destroying a city all on his own. Knuckles wants to restore the Master Emerald and, for whatever reason, doesn't seem to care that he keeps getting sent to the past to see more of his kind. I guess he wants to be lonely forever. Knuckles, forever alone. Amy finds a little birdie that's missing its parents and vows to reunite them. However, the bird is carrying an emerald, and that's why that big robot is after her the whole game. Big is just trying to save his friend Froggy, who has been possessed by a part of Chaos and has eaten multiple Chaos Emeralds. Man, what a jerk. Then there's Gama, who has the best story. Gama is designed by Eggman to pretty much destroy everything, but after Amy shows him the error of his ways, he becomes sentient and realizes Eggman is his enemy. But what's more is he finds out each of the robots have a living bird inside of them powering their systems, including Amy's bird's parents. So Gama decides to take it upon himself to save his brothers and free the birds from within them. which ultimately includes sacrificing himself to save the last bird. It's very gripping, very deep stuff for a Sonic game.
Must save.
Now that we got characters and story out of the way, let's talk about stages real quick. There's 11 different stage locations in the game, as well as 3 different sub-game stages. Each character has a different number of levels. Sonic has the most with 10, while Amy has the least with only 3. These stages are some of the most memorable in the entire Sonic franchise. Everybody remembers running from the whale as Sonic in Emerald Coast, or running down the side of a building in Speed Highway. Or how about blowing up the Sonic, Tails, and Knuckles dolls in Final Egg as Gama? Or maybe you prefer snowboarding away from a huge avalanche as Tails and Ice Cap. Regardless, the stages in this game are all, for the most part, very well done, and it's a shame only Sonic ever gets to play more than 5 of them. Though, honestly, they're not all winners. Lost World, while it may be very unique and interesting, is one of my least favorite stages in any Sonic game. Running on the giant snake while the water rises is a huge pain because the camera gets all wonky, and when you're underwater, so do the controls. And then there's this dark hallway where you have to point these lights and mirrors to light the way. It may not look or sound difficult, but the angle you have to point them at is weird, and it's very easy to die in this part. The Skydeck is another level I'm not a big fan of.
This must be the way to the Skydeck.
There's a bunch of branching paths and of general annoyances you have to work your way around, and the camera can't always keep up with you. Not to mention, when you play this stage as Knuckles, there's just a constant barrage of stuff flying at you the whole time. It's really annoying. It also sort of disappoints me that most of the stages other characters play are just sections of Sonic stages. All of Tails' stages are just short pieces of Sonic stages, as are most every other character's. The only stage Sonic doesn't play is Hot Shelter, which is a stage only Amy, Big, and Gama play. And even though it isn't the best stage in the world, it is cool to see some of the lesser characters get their own unique stage. Heck, even Big has to do more than just fish in this level, so it's pretty cool. And even I have to admit, it's awesome to see the whole casino and Casinopolis stage when you play as Knuckles. Why there's a pirate ship on the 3rd floor of a building, I will never understand, but it's still cool. There's also these weird stages where you're flying on Tails' tornado as Sonic and Tails in their story modes, and you have to shoot a bunch of stuff off the egg carrier. I'm not a big fan of these stages. They're okay, but for the most part, they just seem out of place, and they're kind of boring. The boss battles are all pretty cool, if not a little easy. You fight multiple forms of Chaos as several different characters, though only Sonic fights Chaos 0, and only Knuckles fights Chaos 2. All of the Chaos boss battles require waiting for the right moment to hit him and then keep repeating. Unless you're Big, fighting Chaos 6, in which case all you have to do is get your fishing line to hit where Froggy is located inside of him, and you win. Not much of a boss battle, but cool anyway. Gama, as I mentioned before, fights all the other E-Series robots at the end of each stage, and has some pretty cool boss battles as well, with his second battle with Alpha being pretty difficult at times. My favorite boss battles, however, are Amy's battle with Zero and Tails' battle with the Egg Walker. Amy's battle is so satisfying because you finally get to punish Zero for putting you through hell in every level. And Tails' battle with the Egg Walker just feels the most unique. You have to knock out each of his legs and then attack Eggman inside the top part of the robot. It's classic but fresh. And of course, I have to mention Sonic's final battle with Eggman and how repetitive the dialogue is. Yeah. The final boss battle in the game is another one of my favorites in the whole series. Sonic goes super and fights the now perfect Chaos in a flooded station square. You race across the water at high speeds into the enemy and fly out through his head, all while listening to some awesome music. 6 hits and he's dead. It's not a very hard boss battle, but it is pretty epic. This would also mark the beginning of a long tradition of Sonic only going super during the final boss, something many fans dislike about the series as of now. One of the biggest changes this game made to the Sonic series was the introduction of a hub world, which would later be reused in several other Sonic games, including the dreaded Sonic 06. Basically, it's just a series of areas you can explore that take you all to different levels. I'm not completely against the idea, but I never really liked it in Sonic Adventure. It just seems tedious. The way to get to each stage often requires you to do some silly, unnecessary gimmick just to get in, like find a key or press a series of lights in the correct order. It just feels like unnecessary padding to me. Not to mention, in the Mystic Ruins jungle area, I always get lost just trying to figure out where I'm going. Though you can run on certain parts of the top of the trees, which make it easier to get through, though you'll likely end up falling through to the floor anyway. The only positive thing about the hub world is you can find upgrades hidden around for each of the different characters. These upgrades give each character new abilities, like the Shovel Claws, which let Knuckles dig, or the Jet Booster, which lets Gama hover. I actually really like the idea of upgrading your character's abilities, but I wish they were just in the stages like in Sonic Adventure 2, instead of in a lame hub world. I love Peach's Castle in Super Mario 64, and I really like DK Island in Donkey Kong 64, but the hub world in Sonic Adventure just doesn't do it for me. Also accessible from the game's hub world is the Chow Garden, where you can raise your own little Chow. Now, what are Chow? Well, in story context, they're the race that Chaos watches over, and the whole reason he goes berserk. See, the Echidnas wage war on Chaos and the Chow, thinking they're a threat, when in reality they're just peaceful and adorable. But who cares about that, because you can raise them as your own! Yes, you can go to one of the 3 Chow Gardens and raise your own Chow. They're essentially virtual pets. You can collect animals in each of the character stages and bring them to the Chow Garden to upgrade your Chow's stats, and then use them to compete in a number of different events. It's a neat little distraction, but it's something that would go on to be improved in the sequel, so I tend to not spend much time in this particular game's Chow Garden. Now let's talk about a few of the problems I have with this game, starting with the camera. The camera is probably one of the biggest problems with this game. Now, I already mentioned that sometimes it can't keep up, but it gets worse. It'll oftentimes never want to go where you want it to, or it'll just go wherever it feels like. Sometimes this can lead to some pretty cheap deaths. This is a problem many old platforming games have in common. Even games like Super Mario 64 and Banjo-Kazooie, games considered to be 2 of the greatest platformers of all time, have their fair share of glitchy camera angles. Come to think of it, very few platformers even today can get the camera right. It's been 15 years since Super Mario 64, and the game industry still can't make a functioning camera in a platforming game? Unbelievable. The game can also be pretty glitchy. It's not the glitchiest Sonic game I've ever played, but it does glitch out from time to time. Characters can get stuck on walls or just freak out and spaz all over the place. And then sometimes it... what? I don't even know what to say about that. It's not a huge problem, but it can be noticeable, and sometimes can cost you. Like on that darn snake in Lost World. Okay, sorry. Woo, sorry. Woo. Not trying to bring that up again. Sometimes the controls can be pretty annoying too. For the most part, they work fine, but from time to time, they can be a little slippery. I swear, there was this one part that between the positioning of the camera and the slipperiness of Sonic's controls, I just died, and died, and died, and died. Kind of irritating. Also, and this is probably just something that bugs me, I don't like having to press the jump button and the action button to make Knuckles dig. In Sonic Adventure 2, all you have to do is press one button and he'll dig, even in mid-jump, whereas in this game you have to be stationary for him to dig. Just a minor complaint, but I'm not a big fan. And of course, I can't mention Sonic Adventure without talking about the audio, specifically the voice acting. Yes, this game decided Sonic and friends needed to talk, and I don't blame them. I can't really picture a Sonic game now without voice acting. But boy oh boy is the voice acting in this game bad. I like most of the voice actors. Brian Drummond is awesome as Sonic. But the delivery and corniness of these lines can be so laughable sometimes. This one being a particular favorite of mine. This might just be some translation errors, but I don't know. It's a little wonky. Not to mention the characters move when they talk, and it looks ridiculous. The sound mixing is way off too. I love the music in this game. There's a lot of great tracks, including several theme songs for different characters. But half the cutscenes have music so loud you can't hear the characters talk. Although, maybe you wouldn't want to. Apart from some of the wonky animations, the graphics look alright. I'm playing the GameCube version, which did feature some upgraded character models, which are really shiny for some reason. But for the most part, it looks similar to the Dreamcast version. So, for the time, the graphics were pretty darn good. This was also the first time many of the characters were seen with their new redesigned character models. All the characters are now taller and lankier, while some characters like Amy and Eggman got complete overhauls, for better or worse. Some people miss classic Sonic, but I personally prefer the lanky, taller Sonic. Overall, Sonic Adventure is one of the best 3D Sonic games to be released so far, but yeah, it isn't without its flaws. But I don't think any of them are so major you should overlook the game, especially if you're a Sonic fan. Don't let all the unnecessary flack it gets keep you from playing it. It really is a fun game at its heart, and the cutscenes are worth a laugh too, if nothing else. So, if you haven't played it in a while at all, or if you just haven't played it, check it out. Just don't expect a masterpiece. And, try not to cry when Gama dies.
I put out my hands and emeralds appear. I am freaking David Copperfield. Eat that.
Josh, what are you laughing at, Josh? Because I know it's not Tim.
Sick burn.